Washington had let them go, but the mark on Theo's palm had not faded. They drove south through Virginia, with the windows cracked, chasing mountain air that smelled like distance and wet pine, and nobody mentioned the sealed station or the train that had almost sounded kind. The car fishtailed on the mountain road, like the fog had grabbed the back bumper and yanked. Sarah James swore, fought the wheel, and kept the sedan from kissing the guardrail by a distance so small it felt personal. "Tony," she shouted, "stop filming and help me steer." Tony Francis had his phone half out the window, flashlight on, trying to catch whatever huge shape had just thundered alongside them in the white soup of Blue Ridge fog. "In my defense," Tony yelled, "if we survive this, the footage is incredible. Help." That part, finally, got through. Tony dropped the phone into his lap and lunged forward between the seats like a badly trained co-pilot. Theo Sanchez grabbed the back of Tony's hoodie before Tony could fully launch himself into Sarah's steering space and accidentally murder all 5 of them. "Not on the wheel," Theo snapped. "On the handbrake, if she says it. Otherwise, breathe and be useful." "I am being useful," Tony said. "Very fast. I am emotionally supporting the vehicle." The car swerved again. Outside, something hit the fog line beside them at full speed. Not a shape, a pressure, a moving absence. Big enough to make the mist buckle around it. Alan Roosevelt twisted in the back seat, recorder in one hand, pale face lit by the dashboard. "I heard it," he said. Theo braced a hand on the roof. As Sarah corrected the car again, "Heard what?" Alan swallowed. "A growl." Tony pointed wildly out the side window. "Yes, that seems on brand." Alan shook his head hard. "No. Not just a growl. It sounded like a dog. Then like a man trying to make a dog sound. Then like..." He stopped. Sarah's voice was tight. "Then like what?" Alan stared at the fog, like a choir under a growl. That landed badly. Theo felt his rosary warm against his chest. Not hot, not warning hot, thinking hot. The kind of heat that came when a place had rules. And the rules were about to become the only reason they stayed alive. Ahead, 2 yellow lights appeared through the fog. Not eyes, porch lights. A cabin crouched beside the road, half hidden behind black trees, old timber walls shining with mountain damp. A hand-painted sign leaned near the gravel turnoff. Service cabin 8, Blue Ridge Park. Sarah saw it and didn't ask permission. She turned the wheel and threw the car onto the gravel lane. The tires screamed. Stones spat. The sedan bounced hard enough to make Tony headbutt the seat. "Cabin," Sarah shouted. "Everybody loves cabins." "Cabins are shelter." Tony rubbed his forehead. "That is not a sentence people survive." They shot between 2 leaning pines and slammed to a stop in front of the porch steps. The porch light flickered twice. The fog behind them rolled across the road and stopped at the clearing like it had reached a border. No one moved for 1 heartbeat. Then, something huge crossed the lane they had just left. Fast. Too fast to name. A blur of wet, dark mass and pale teeth shape, and shoulders too high for a normal dog. It did not charge the car. It matched their stopping point, paced once at the edge of the trees, then vanished into the fog again as if the mountain had inhaled it. Tony made a small, offended noise. That was the size of a sofa. Theo was already out of the car. "Bags," he shouted. "Salt, water, lights. Inside now." The 5 of them spilled out into cold mountain air that smelled of wet bark, stone, and something old enough to hate headlights. Theo's mind flashed to the phone call 3 days ago. Uncle Pete's voice, gruff and careful. "You kids go through Blue Ridge. You keep your headlights off the tree line. Boundary testers up there follow light edges. Old ranger rule. Don't forget it." He hadn't forgotten it. He just hadn't expected it to matter this fast. Jessica Martinez hit the porch first, holy water bottle in hand, eyes sweeping the shadows under the eaves. Sarah grabbed the emergency duffel. Alan clutched the recorder and his backpack. Tony came last, dragging the salt sprayer and muttering what sounded suspiciously like 3 different prayers mashed into one panic sentence. Theo reached the door and stopped. A medal hung from the doorknob. Small, tarnished. Saint Christopher. Not decorative. Used. That mattered. Theo grabbed it, looked once at Jessica, and they understood the same thing at the same time. Someone knew the rules, Jessica said. Theo nodded. Inside, the door opened on the first shove. The cabin was 1 room, plus a tiny back kitchenette, and a bathroom smaller than Mercy. Old wood walls, iron stove, 2 bunks, a ranger's desk, maps, a hunting lamp, a framed photograph of 3 park rangers in older uniforms smiling beside a trail marker. Tony dropped the salt sprayer on the desk, and his hand brushed the old ranger photo frame. He flinched. For half a second less, he saw it. A man in a green uniform, alone, hanging the St. Christopher medal on the doorknob with shaking hands. Night behind him. Fog pressing at the porch. The man's lips moving in prayer. Then it was gone. Tony blinked hard. Someone used this place to survive something, he said, and his voice had lost its comedy. Theo looked at him sharply. After image? Tony nodded once. The ranger. He was scared, but he stayed. That settled something in the room that no one could name. The warmth inside was fake warm, the kind a cabin keeps after years of wood smoke, even when the stove has gone cold. But the place did not feel hostile. Tense, yes. Watched, yes. Wrong, no. That helped. Sarah slammed the door and dropped the duffel on the table. Move. They had done this enough times that the routine was almost embarrassing. Tony sprayed salt along the windowsills with the concentration of a man icing a cake for God. Jessica salted the doorframe and whispered a blessing over each threshold. Sarah checked every latch, every hinge, every possible stupid way a mountain thing could turn a safe structure into a bad memory. Alan set the recorder on the desk and aimed the microphone at the walls. Theo touched the St. Christopher medal once, then hung it on the inside latch. Windows first, Sarah said. Already doing windows, Tony said. Better. Rude. The cabin had 4 windows. East wall, 2 over the sink, 1 beside the bunks. By the time they finished salting them, the fog outside had thickened until the trees had vanished. The whole world beyond the glass was white and waiting. Sarah felt it first. Not a sound, a weight. The air inside the cabin thickened against her skin like humidity that had nothing to do with weather. Pressure built behind her eardrums. Subtle and wrong. The way a room feels when someone very large steps into it without making noise. Something's close, she said. Her voice came out flatter than she intended. Theo looked at her. How close? Already here. 3 seconds later, the floorboards confirmed it. Heavy footfalls on damp ground. A slow scrape near the porch. 1 snuffling inhale under the sink window. Then it came around the cabin, not in a rush, not charging, circling. The first pass was reconnaissance. It moved from the porch to the east wall, to the back corner without stopping, as if it was measuring the structure by feel, testing which walls had salt behind them, which didn't. Tony froze with the salt sprayer raised. I hate how calm it is. Theo listened. No slamming, no attack, no rabid rush at the door, just circling, testing. He hated that more. Jessica stood near the center of the room, rosary in one hand, holy water in the other. Her voice was steady, but low. It isn't trying to get in. Sarah looked at her sharply. Then, what is it trying to do? Before Jessica could answer, a long scrape crawled across the porch boards outside. One claw, slowly, deliberately, then another, then a third. The sound landed like a fingernail dragged across schoolroom silence. Tony shut his eyes. Great. It's literate. Alan's recorder crackled. The waveform spiked. Not in one clean animal pattern, in layers. Theo moved beside Alan and heard it through the tiny monitor speaker. A growl, deep, wet, canine, under it. A human breath trying to shape the same note and failing. And under that, absurdly, horribly, a soft chord. Several voices pressed together in one low vibration. As if something had taught a choir to mimic a wolf, and the choir had not enjoyed the assignment. Alan's face had gone colorless again. It's doing all three at once now, he whispered. Theo stared at the wall. Sentinel, he said. Sarah glanced over, meaning Theo's third eye pulsed. Threads, boundaries, pressure. A sight not centered here, but passing near here. A guarding presence. Not a feeding one. A test. A checkpoint. It's not the node, Theo said. It's the thing they put near the node. Tony blinked. You're telling me the giant murder dog is basically security? Maybe I preferred when I thought it was just rude nature. The circling stopped. Silence pressed against the cabin walls. Tony didn't like silence. Silence meant something was thinking. He slapped the flat of his hand against the east wall. Hard, twice. Hey, he shouted at the fog. Still here. Not running. Theo spun on him. Tony, too late. The cabin lights dropped. Not out, lower, as if the whole cabin had inhaled and decided maybe electricity was optional tonight. The recorder spat static. Alan flinched and caught it before it fell off the desk. Tony stared at the dimmed bulbs with the expression of a man who had just confirmed a theory he'd hoped was wrong. Okay, he said quietly. Mocking invites attention. Noted. Jessica gave him a look that could have peeled paint. Again, she said. The bulbs brightened slowly. Then the thing hit the north wall. Not full force. A shoulder check? Enough to make the cabin shudder and dust drift from the beams. Jessica raised her voice now. Not loud, but clear. In the name of Jesus Christ, you do not cross this house. The wind outside changed. Not stronger, more attentive. The fog pressed against the east windows and held there, like someone listening at a chapel door. Tony looked at Jessica. Did the weather just eavesdrop? She didn't take her eyes off the window. It understood the shape of the prayer. That is not better. The porch scraping resumed. Sarah moved instantly to the side window near the porch and angled her flashlight through the glass. The light caught wet porch wood and 3 fresh claw marks. Not claw marks, strokes. Half a compass point. 1 hooked angle. 1 curved line. The twisted symbol. Tony stared. No. Jessica moved beside Sarah. The shape incomplete, but not by much. 1 more pass, maybe 2. Theo's jaw tightened so hard it hurt. It's not trying to get in, he said. It's trying to mark the cabin. Alan looked up from the recorder. Why? Theo already knew. He hated that he knew because this place is protected, he said. It has a medal on the door. Somebody used it as a safe point. If the surveyor can mark the porch, it turns shelter into a doorway. Sarah's face hardened instantly. Then it doesn't finish. Outside, the creature stopped moving. Silence pressed against the walls. Then a single breath hit the porch boards, slow, heavy, close enough that the wood under the door trembled. Tony lifted the salt sprayer higher. If it comes through, I'm spraying everything. Walls, floor, myself, the concept of the room. No hero moments, Sarah said. That phrase has never helped me. Words glitched across the recorder's tiny screen for half a second. Boundary test. Active, then vanished. Tony stared at it. I would like evil to stop using subtitles. Sarah turned toward Theo. You said sentinel. So what's the job? Theo kept watching the porch window. To scare us out. Jessica followed that thought fast. Run us off the marked road. Or out of the safe point. Sarah added. Alan swallowed into something worse that felt right enough to make everyone colder. The creature changed tactics. It left the porch and hit the roof. The ceiling boomed. Dust rained onto the table. Tony looked up in horror. It can do roof. Apparently, Sarah said through her teeth. A snarl crawled over the rafters. Then claws dragged above them. Not random. Again, that careful writing sound, the same scratching as symbol work, but on a new surface, as if the porch had been attempt 1 and the roof was attempt 2. Theo's blood chilled. It's trying another surface, Tony said. Why is it so committed to graphic design? Jessica didn't waste breath answering. She lifted her voice in prayer again. Stronger now. The St. Michael prayer, not whispered, declared. The wind outside answered at once. Not submitting, not calming, but reacting. The fog around the cabin rolled tighter, circling the structure in a low white belt. The roof claws stopped for 1 second, enough for Theo to move. Back room, he said. Now, the kitchenette had one rear door. Small, narrow, badly placed, which meant, of course it mattered. Theo shoved past the hanging curtain and hit the back room just as the rear door began to rattle. Not from the handle, from something nosing the wood low to the ground, like a wolf testing a trap. A single line appeared under the door, not light red, not bright red, dull, like embers dragged across black ash. Tony came skidding in behind him and nearly crashed into the table. I hate the back door, Tony announced. No one asked, Sarah said, appearing at his shoulder with another flashlight. The red line under the door shifted, moved a hooked angle, then stopped. Theo understood with a fresh stab of nausea. Porch, roof, back door. It's marking every threshold it can reach. Alan stood in the doorway to the kitchenette. Recorder raised, breathing too fast. The sound changed. He played 1 second of the live feed. The growl was there, but beneath it now, another rhythm pulsed in clean intervals. Scratch, pause, scratch, scratch, pause. Survey, pattern. Not frenzy. Instruction. Theo felt the whole shape of it click together. Oh, no, he said. Sarah looked at him sharply. What? This thing isn't improvising. Jessica stepped in from the main room. Say that again. Theo looked at each of them in the cramped little kitchen with the busted mug tree and the ranger maps pinned on the wall. It's trained, he said. Silence. Hit. Tony let out one flat, disbelieving laugh. No. I reject that. Theo pointed toward the rear door. It never crossed salt. It tested every threshold. It tried the porch first, because the porch is public-facing. Then the roof, then the back door. Not random. Systematic. Alan stared at the recorder screen like he wanted the waveform to disagree. It's following a sequence, Alan whispered. Jessica's face hardened like cattle branding. Theo nodded once Exactly. The room got colder. Not supernaturally colder, human colder. The kind of cold that comes when a bad idea becomes a worse truth. Sarah looked toward the front room. Then whoever trained it knows what safe houses look like. That was the real hit. This wasn't just a haunted mountain thing. This was field work. Testing which protections held. Testing where the kids ran. Testing how long it took to panic them out of shelter. The surveyor wasn't just mapping places anymore. It was mapping behavior. Tony leaned against the counter. Suddenly too still. Guys, he said quietly, which was how everyone knew he was actually scared. If it's trained, that means there are more. Nobody contradicted him. Jessica crossed to the door. We break the symbol before it finishes. Sarah looked at her like she had suggested juggling knives in church. The thing is literally on the porch. I know. Theo thought hard. Fast. They could not open the door. The salt line mattered. The threshold mattered. The sentinel had respected it so far. If they broke it themselves, they would be volunteering for stupidity. Window. He looked at the porch window again. At the angle, at the half-formed symbol. We hit it from the side, Theo said. Holy water through the porch glass. Not enough to break the salt inside. Enough to wash the shape. Sarah nodded at once. I can crack the window latch 2 inches. Tony perked up. I can do nozzle work. Sarah turned slowly to look at him. Tony reconsidered his phrasing. That sounded worse. Out loud. Jessica nearly smiled. Nearly. Another scrape sounded outside. The symbol grew. Theo moved everyone into position. Sarah at the porch side window latch. Jessica with the holy water. Tony with the salt sprayer as backup. Alan at the recorder, tracking the sound pattern. Theo at the door, rosary in hand, listening to the creature's steps and the pressure against the porch boards. On my count, Theo said. The thing outside moved left, paused, breathed. Alan looked at the waveform. Now, Sarah cracked the latch. The window opened 2 inches. Fog shoved a cold hand through the gap instantly. Jessica threw the holy water, a white arc in the flashlight beam. The water hit the porch boards with a hiss, like a brand dropped in snow. Something outside exploded into sound. The howl hit all 3 notes at once. Dog, man, choir. It wasn't loud in a normal way. It was structurally loud. The cabin walls shivered. The lamp chimney rang. Tony actually yelped, and then looked offended at being betrayed by his own mouth. The fog outside thrashed. A huge shape hit the side of the porch rail and launched back into white. The half-finished compass symbol blackened and smeared, the clean strokes warping into useless streaks. Sarah slammed the window shut and latched it. The lights went fully out. Darkness, the kind that makes everyone discover exactly how much they love electricity. Flashlights, Sarah snapped. Beams sprang alive again. 3, this time. Hard white cones slicing the cabin into angles and shadows. The thing outside was no longer circling. It was angry. Porch, post, first. A hard slam. Wood cracked. The whole front of the cabin jolted. Then another slam. Sarah swore. It's bringing the porch down. Theo spun toward the main room. If the porch collapsed, the creature would not need to cross the front threshold. It could break the structure around it. Salt mattered at openings. It did not help much if the opening became the entire wall. Positions, Theo shouted. They ran. Main room again. Flashlights swinging. The front porch had sagged visibly through the window. One support post was split halfway through. Raw wood pale against wet dark. Another hit. would bring part of the roof extension down. The creature moved in the fog below the steps, bigger. Now that they could see more of it, a ridge of shoulders, wet fur, or something pretending to be fur, a head too broad for any normal hound, eyes that reflected porch light for half a second, and then didn't, as if even eye shine was something it borrowed only when useful, and its mouth, not open, smiling, not in a human way, in the way a trained animal looks pleased, when the command finally makes sense. Tony saw it and recoiled. Nope, that's worse. Why is it pleased? Theo answered, before he meant to, because it figured us out. The sentinel wasn't trying to get inside, because the cabin wasn't the true objective anymore. The people inside were, specifically, the point at which fear would make them choose the road over the shelter. The mountain over the known rules. The run over the line. If it could break the porch and make the cabin feel unsafe enough, they'd flee. And out in the fog, somewhere beyond headlight range, something else would be waiting. That was the midpoint truth. And Theo felt it land in his bones. This isn't the trap, he said. Sarah's head snapped around. What? This cabin isn't the trap. It's the last safe thing before the trap. Jessica understood. First, it wants us back on the road. Alan swallowed hard. Toward what? Theo thought of the ridge, the surveyor, the trained scratching, the mountain road curling into fog, like a line on a map that wanted to become a door, a marked stretch, he said, or a drop, or another sight. But whatever's next only works if we run. Tony actually looked angry. Then not scared angry, insulted angry. So this overgrown church wolf is trying to hurt us? Yes. Tony lifted the salt sprayer like a knight drawing a holy fire extinguisher. I dislike being hurted. The porch post cracked again. Sarah made her decision. We hold the cabin, she said, and we break every mark it tries to make. That was leadership. Not shouting, not drama, clear jobs. Theo saw the shift in himself before he heard it. Right, he said. Sarah, windows and structure. Tony, all salt to thresholds and the porch seam inside. Jess, prayer anchor in the center. Alan, call patterns and movement. I'll hit the porch marks if they reform. Nobody argued. That mattered too. They moved like a system. Sarah shoved the table against the front wall beneath the main window. Not because furniture would stop the beast, but because momentum mattered and bad wood behaved better when it had company. Tony layered the door frame until the salt line looked thick enough to stop a tax inspector. Jessica stood in the center of the room, hands steady now, and prayed not like a frightened kid, but like a girl who had grown up knowing that evil liked performance and holiness liked truth. Alan crouched by the desk, recorder up, eyes moving between waveform and walls. Left side, he called. Theo was already there. A scratch began outside the porch window again. Fresh line, fresh angle. He flicked holy water through the crack. Where the old frame didn't quite meet the glass, the mark hissed and vanished. The creature snarled and slammed the porch post again in frustration. Sarah swore and grabbed the old lantern hanging by the stove. What are you doing? Theo asked. She yanked the fuel canister free, changing the light. Before anyone could object, she killed the porch lamp by reaching through the curtain gap and smashing the switch plate with the lantern's metal base. Darkness swallowed the porch. The creature froze completely. Only its breath remained. Jessica looked at Sarah. Why did that work? Sarah's eyes were sharp. Uncle Pete said it on the phone. Boundary testers follow light edges, not light itself. Boundaries created by light. She pointed at the ranger desk. A small laminated card half hidden under the mountain map read, if followed at night, Do not keep lights on the tree line. Same rule, she said. Headlights. Porch lights. It tracks where people feel safe. Theo's mind jumped. And where they stop seeing what's beyond it? Exactly. Jessica finished. The sentinel was silent outside now, disoriented by the loss of the porch light. Not gone. Thinking. That gave them maybe seconds. Alan's recorder crackled again. He listened, then pointed toward the back wall. It's circling wider, he said, toward the tree line. Theo went cold again. The ridge, the surveyor, didn't need the creature to break the cabin. It needed the creature to keep them busy, while something else was placed, a mark on the road, on the trees, on the lane they'd use to leave. We need to know what it's doing outside the clearing, Theo said. Sarah turned on him in disbelief. And how exactly do you plan to check that? Politely. Theo looked at the ranger desk. Map, old binoculars, a back window facing uphill. Not good, but better than guessing. He grabbed the binoculars and moved to the rear side window. Fog, pines, dark slope. Then lightning flickered far off behind the mountain clouds, giving the ridge one silver second of shape. That was enough. On the gravel lane leading back to the road, 3 pale stones had been placed in a hooked pattern, compass strokes fresh beyond them, near the tree line. Another 2, making the line longer, building a route. Theo lowered the binoculars. Slowly. It's not marking the cabin now, he said. It's marking our way out. Jessica's face went hard. So if we panic and leave, we drive straight through the symbol. Exactly. Tony stared at the dark. This thing really hates subtlety, once you understand it. For 1 second, the binoculars caught the ridge above the lane. Black trees, wet rock, and a tall figure standing still between 2 pines. No face visible. No details, just a long coat shape and one reflective surface held at chest height. Watching, not helping the creature, not calling it off, just observing. The beam hit the reflector and bounced back so hard, Theo had to turn away. When he looked again, the ridge was empty. Tony whispered, I really hate when management shows up. Jessica looked at Theo, the surveyor. Theo nodded, and then Alan made a strangled little sound. He was staring, not at the ridge, but at the recorder. On the screen, text crawled in broken, stuttering blocks. Field, sentinel, response, adequate, subject retention, high, shelter adaptation, observed. Tony blinked. Nope. No. I would like to unsubscribe from being a case study. Sarah grabbed the recorder, read it once, and looked physically offended. It's timing us. Jessica looked toward the door again. Jaw set. Then we stop the test. Theo looked toward the dark front window and made the choice. We do not leave tonight. Sarah nodded at once. Relief and dread at the same time. Agreed. Jessica exhaled. Then we hold until morning. Tony blinked. In a haunted ranger shoebox with a choir wolf outside. Yes, Sarah said. Strong pass. You're outvoted. Theo thought fast. Morning light might matter. Headlights clearly mattered. Thresholds mattered. Cabin shelter mattered. The mark on the lane mattered. They needed to survive the night, then break the exit mark before the car moved. Rule-based, step by step. That steadied him. Okay, Theo said. No one goes outside until daylight. We rotate watch in pairs. If the thing scratches, we wash the mark. If it hits the structure, we brace and pray. Nobody answers any voice from outside. Nobody opens a door for a sound they miss. Tony raised one hand weakly. I would also like a rule against me becoming mountain bait. Accepted, Jessica said. That finally got a tiny, cracked smile out of Sarah. The next hour passed like bad weather. Wearing a watch, the sentinel returned in bursts. A scratch at the rear step answered with holy water. A frustrated howl. 2 slow passes under the east windows. Met by Jessica's prayer, steady in the middle of the room. A shadow, crossing the roofline and disappearing before anyone got a clean look. At one point, the thing stood directly outside the front wall, close enough that Theo could hear its breathing and smell wet leaves and animal musk, and something older under it, like cold stone dragged from a riverbed. It never crossed. Not once. The salt mattered. The prayers mattered. And maybe, somewhere in all that, the old ranger medal mattered too. Sometime around what felt like 3 in the morning, Alan's head dipped just for a second. His chin touched his chest, and his eyes closed, and the recorder almost slipped from his fingers. In that second, he dreamed. The dream was short and sharp, the way his warnings always came near pledged ground. A flash of the gravel lane in gray light, the car rolling forward, the front tires crossing the pale stone marks, the engine dying sideways, fog filling the road like water in a drain. The howler didn't attack. It just kept them there. And then a second shape came out of the trees, not rushing, walking, opening something in the road, surfaced like a man lifting a trapdoor that shouldn't exist. Alan jerked awake with a gasp that made Tony jump. "Don't let it take the car," Alan said. Everyone stopped. Theo stepped toward him. "What did you see?" Alan's voice came out like paper, dragged over stone. "The lane. If we drive out now, the front tires cross the mark. The car stalls sideways. The fog fills the road. The howler doesn't attack. It just keeps us there." Jessica moved to Alan's side and gripped his wrist. "What after that?" Alan swallowed hard. A second shape comes out of the trees. Nobody spoke because they all knew who. Tony's voice was tiny. "The surveyor." Alan nodded once. "And it doesn't rush. It just opened something in the road." The cabin went very quiet. No more scratching, no more roof walking, no more porch hits. That silence was the worst sound of the night because it meant the sentinel had finished its part. Around what Sarah declared to be probably 4 in the morning, and I hate all of us, the fog changed color. Not brightened, thinned, just enough for the trees nearest the clearing to exist again as shapes instead of rumors. The sentinel gave one long, low howl from somewhere uphill. No choir under it this time. No human breath. Just dog grief stretched too far. Then silence. Real silence. The kind that comes after a test is marked and handed in. Nobody moved for a full minute. Tony finally whispered, "Please tell me that means it left." Alan checked the recorder. The waveform had flattened. Wind only. Tree drip. They're breathing. "It backed off," he said. Theo waited another 30 seconds. Anyway, then he approached the front window with the binoculars. Gray dawn was pushing through the fog in thin strips. The clearing looked exhausted. The porch had survived. Barely. The support post leaned. The gravel lane showed 3 pale stone marks, just where he'd seen them, and beyond them, bones. A circle of old bones in the wet grass near the first trees. Not human. Too long in the jaw. Too narrow in the ribs. Deer? Maybe. Fox. Something else? Arranged deliberately, nose to tail in a ring facing outward from the cabin. A warning circle, not bait. Warning. Theo stared. Jessica came beside him and saw them, too. Those weren't there last night. No, Theo said quietly, or we didn't see them. Sarah joined them. What am I looking at? The cabin wasn't random, Theo said. Whoever used this place before us knew. Tony peered between them and immediately regretted it. That is deeply not decorative. The dawn gave them enough light to work. No one suggested breakfast. They moved with the tired determination of people who had survived because the rules held and would like to keep that streak alive. Sarah opened the front door exactly 3 inches while Tony reinforced the inner threshold. No reaction. Theo tossed a pinch of salt onto the porch. Nothing. Jessica flicked holy water at the porch boards. The old black smear where the symbol had begun stayed dead. Good. They stepped outside as a unit. Porch first, then yard. The air felt wrung out. No active pressure. Just mountain morning after a bad dream. The bone circle sat beyond the clearing. Old weather bleached. Remains arranged with intent. Snouts outward. Ribs angled like little white gates. In the center of the circle sat one object. A ranger badge. Old brass. Tarnished. Bent. Sarah crouched without crossing the bone line. Not human remains. Deer and smaller predators. Mostly. Alan frowned. Why arrange them like this? Theo looked at the circle and understood with a sick, slow certainty. Not a ritual circle. He said, a warning sign. Boundary markers? Whoever made this was sane. The thing beyond this point is not part of the woods. It's a watcher. At the edge, Jessica crossed herself quietly. Sentinel. Theo nodded. Tony looked toward the lane. Can we focus on the part where our car is parked behind a road symbol? Yes. The gravel lane still held the pale stones in hooked angles, completing enough of the twisted compass to matter. Not finished. Beautifully finished. Functionally. The surveyor did not need art. It needed the car to pass across the line. Theo stood over the first stone without touching it. Holy water first, he said. Jessica nodded and uncapped the bottle. She poured a line over the nearest stone. The effect was immediate. The stone cracked clean down the middle. With a loud snap, the other place stones trembled in the wet gravel, as if the shape between them had been a stretched wire and someone had cut it. Tony made a satisfied noise. Ha! They moved from stone to stone. Water, crack, salt, prayer. By the 5th stone, the lane looked like nothing more than a badly abandoned campsite puzzle. Alan checked the recorder. Nothing but morning birds, beginning their work in cautious little bursts. Then he frowned. There's one more sound. Everybody froze. Alan turned the volume up. Far away, up on the ridge, a shriek. Short, furious, humiliated. The Blue Ridge Howler, not dying, leaving. The sound rolled through the fog and was gone. Theo looked uphill and saw, for one impossible second through thinning mist, the creature between the trees. Huge shoulders, dark, wet coat, head turned back toward the cabin. Then it vanished into white and pine shadow. It did not charge. It did not return. It was done. Tony exhaled, like a man finishing a hostage negotiation with his own nervous system. Mission accomplished. Nobody laughed because Theo was still looking at the ridge, at the place where, if the light hit wrong, a tall figure could have stood with a reflective board and taken notes while the mountain did its work. He spoke quietly, and the quiet made everyone listen harder. This one didn't want us dead, he said. Jessica followed his gaze uphill. It wanted us scared enough to run, she finished. Sarah looked back at the cabin, the metal on the door, the broken porch post, the washed-out claw marks. So the safe place was the target. Because it was safe. Theo nodded. Once. And because they needed to know how long we'd trust it before fear beat structure. Tony rubbed both hands over his face. I am starting to take this very personally. Alan looked at the lane. Then at his recorder. It learned something, he said. Theo looked at him. Yeah. Alan swallowed. So did we. That was true too. They packed fast. Before leaving, Jessica reblessed the doorway and left the St. Christopher medal where it had been. Theo added a fresh line of salt across the cabin threshold. Sarah folded the old ranger map and left it on the desk exactly where they had found it. Tony, after a long debate with himself visible on his whole face, set one granola bar on the table. Sarah stared at him. What are you doing? Tony shrugged. Not as an offering. Calm down. As a thank you to whichever dead ranger had the brilliant idea to put a saint medal on the doorknob. Jessica's mouth twitched. That is the weirdest, respectful thing you've ever done. I contain multitudes. They got in the car. Sarah started the engine. It caught clean. No stall. No weird pulse. No mark on the tires. No helpful invitation from the fog. Just a normal engine doing normal car things, which felt, frankly, miraculous. As they rolled slowly down the gravel lane past the shattered stones, Theo looked once in the side mirror. The cabin sat in the clearing, small and stubborn in the morning mist, safe for now. At the edge of the trees, the bone circle gleamed pale, and beyond that, where the ridge climbed into fog, a dark shape moved once and was gone. Not the surveyor. Too low, too heavy. The sentinel retreating to its line. Tony saw Theo looking and slumped deeper in his seat. Do not tell me it's pacing us. Lie to me if necessary. It's not pacing us, Theo said. Tony eyed him. Was that the truth? Or friendship? Yes, Jessica said. That got the first real laugh of the morning. Small, cracked, tired, but real. Sarah guided the car back onto the mountain road. The fog thinned by degrees, revealing guardrails, rock cuts, wet trees, and the long ribbon of road curling south. Alan stared at the recorder screen. A final line of glitched text flickered once, then held. Field test complete. Flight response denied. He showed Theo. Theo stared at it, then looked out at the road ahead. Good, he said. Tony leaned forward from the back seat. What does that mean in normal, human English? Sarah answered. Before Theo could. It means, she said, eyes on the road. We didn't run. Behind them, in the fog above the lane, the Blue Ridge Howler lifted its head once more and gave a low, unhappy sound toward the empty road. Not a hunting cry, a failed signal. Then the mountain took it back. In the clearing behind the cabin, the bone circle sat undisturbed in the gray light. The ranger badge at its center had turned face down sometime in the night, and no wind had done it. On the porch, where the holy water had blackened the half-formed symbol, a single fresh scratch mark gleamed in the wet wood. One stroke. The beginning of a line that hadn't been there at dawn. Something was already trying again. You've been listening to Salt and Lanterns from Saltline Studio. Stay together. Keep the light on.